I've owned these BFG KO2s for over a year now, and today I want to go through and talk about all the things that I love and all the things that I don't really love about these tires. Over the last year, I've had these tires on just about every terrain there is. Mud, snow, sand, rocks, and of course the street. The size that I'm using is a 285/70 R17, and in this video, I want to give you a rating for each category and talk about my impressions of these tires overall. The first category we're going to cover today is mud, and mud is just an all-terrain's worst enemy. These are not designed to perform well in mud. I would say the best performing all-terrain in mud is okay at best. And that's because they want to give you a certain amount of highway performance at the sacrifice of mud performance. They take the tread and they narrow it. They narrow the spacing in between the tread to give it a quieter ride. Supposedly it gives you a better stopping distance, some different things like that. And this makes it to where when the mud gets into those narrow voids, it stays there and it doesn't clear very well. And with a mud terrain, they widen that void out, and they'll even taper it on most modern mud terrains to make it to where the mud will eject out of that tread really easily, and the sacrifice is road noise and road handling characteristics in some cases. So these are all things to consider whenever you're shopping for a tire and decide whether or not you need a mud terrain or an all-terrain. Where I live, it is wet 9 to 10 months out of the year, so if it's wet, when you go off-road in the dirt, you're in mud. The first 3 or 4 wheeling trips that I had these tires on, mud clung into every single nook and cranny of these, and it did not leave the entire day until I got back on the highway. These are not designed to be a good mud terrain. That being said, my rating in mud is a 4 out of 10, and so a 1 would be like a normal highway radial tire, like you'd find on just a bone stock, like 2-wheel drive Silverado or a Honda Civic or a Jetta or something like that. So that would be a 1. A 10 would be like a bogger, an actual competition mud tire. So of course these aren't gonna be on the high side of mud performance, but don't let that scare you away from buying these. These are still okay in mud. I was able to move around, I was able to have some fun. They just don't perform well in the places that I go wheeling. If you're an overlander and you just are occasionally gonna see mud, you're gonna go through small chunks of mud, these are fine for that. This is just not a tire you wanna buy and put on a full-time wheeler if you live in a place like I do in Western Washington. The second category I wanna talk about today is the road manners, and to me that is the most impressive part about this. These are a legit off-road tire, and they are still so quiet after all these miles that the previous owner put on them and now we have put on them, and they're wearing completely flat and even. And I can't say enough about how they're still quiet. They ride really nice. There's not chunks of tread flying off anywhere. They're very, very good on the road. My opinion is these are like a 9 out of 10 as far as a road tire. The only thing that would be a 10 would be just like a Prius tire or, just some sort of a highway specific tire. But even highway specific tires as they wear, I've heard some of those get really loud. These are incredibly quiet. They're super durable and they're wearing completely flat, all of them. So I think that this is about as good as it gets. At least this is as good as you could expect out of an off-road tire. And I think that this is a really good reason to buy these if you plan on putting a ton of road miles on your vehicle. The next category is sand. Sand is something that you don't find a lot in Washington unless you go to the ocean. And that is actually where I had most of the sand experience with these tires. I had a little bit of off-road sand experience when I was using them in my Disco 2, but nothing that notable. So most of the sand experience where I was actually paying attention to how well they were doing was a couple weeks ago. I had these in the LR3 and we took the family out to the ocean, and I'm an off-road guy. You go to the ocean, they tell you can drive on the beach, you're gonna try to get stuck, you're gonna drive into the soft stuff. And I was very impressed with the sand performance on the beach. Now, that's not the best test. The best test would be going to the dunes and going up some super steep stuff, but I don't have that available to me. So I got to just spend the day cruising along the side of the beach. I wanted to get them to dig. I wanted to really put them in a position where they had to fight to keep us floating, but I never really had that problem. I didn't air down. I just kept it at 35 PSI, and even at 35 PSI, riding way up into the soft stuff, they just floated no problem. So I never had a situation where I would stop and then they would dig when I started. It would just slowly cruise back up to speed, and they were really impressive in the sand. Now, I think that in order for me to give a really good, accurate recommendation on whether or not these are good in sand, I need to take them to the dunes. I need to put them through a really hard dune run and just try to go up those super steep sand dunes in order to see how well they're going to do. But with the testing that I did off, at the ocean with these, I would say these are at the very least a good sand tire. But for me to tell you they're a great sand tire, I would need more testing. I think that this is between a 6 and a 9, somewhere in there. So far, the performance has proved it's at least a 6, and I would say they could be as good as a 9, but I won't know until, well, if I ever get the opportunity to take them up a steep dune. There's not much opportunity for that where I live, but who knows, maybe one day. The fourth category we're going to talk about today is one of my favorite categories, and that is snow. There's a lot of you that have never wheeled in snow, and that's something I never even considered because I'm just so spoiled where I live. We have really good snow wheeling up here, but I've had those of you from like Saudi Arabia, people from places all over the world that have said, we have never seen snow wheeling and we love your snow wheeling videos. So for those of you that don't really care about the snow performance, but you want to see some really cool snow videos, you will definitely be seeing these tires on my wife's LR3 getting stuck in super deep snow. I'm going to push that thing hard this winter in the snow and see how good these tires are in the deep stuff. Now, up to this point, I have had these in the snow a few times, but it's all been on like snowy roads. So the kind of snow that pertains to the kind of people that are watching this video. You're looking at buying these potentially and you want to know how good they are. Snowy roads, these are outstanding. They're probably one of the best snow tires I have personally used. Stopping hard, they did really well at stopping in a short distance. They didn't slide around side to side. I never felt unstable. And I don't have any good like snow wheeling B-roll of these yet to overlay in this video, but I'll put a couple pictures of us parked up at my in-laws' cabin from me wheeling my family, basically, just driving my family over a snowy mountain pass to go get to their cabin last winter. So I think that at this point, I'm gonna rate these very similar to the sand. These are at least a 6 out of 10. They're outstanding on the road when the road is covered in snow, but I won't know if they're a 9 out of 10, or who knows, maybe even a 10 out of 10 until this winter when I can air them down to 6 PSI and get them just really high up in the mountains into that deep powder. The fifth category is rocks, and I am not being overly generous when I say that this is a great rock tire. It really is. If you live in the Midwest, or like the dry part of the Midwest, and you are looking for an all-terrain that is good in rocky terrain, I think that this is an amazing option. Because of the way the tread pattern is chopped up into so many small sections, even though this is a harder compound of tire, it makes it to where whenever you air down, it folds over rocks and obstacles very well. So I took a really long trip with my buddy Brad with Trail Recon, and we were doing a ton of on-road, off-road, airing these way down, airing them way up, and they did so well on that trip. And I thought they were amazing on the highway, but they were even better in the rocks. My Land Rover Discovery is open differential front and rear, so I know a lot of you guys are watching this. It could be in vehicles that are open differential as well. And even though it was open differential, with these folding over the rocks the way they did, the Disco performed in the rocks way better than it should have because it had a really good rock tire. Now, I'm gonna give these an 8 out of 10 for rock performance, which I think is a really high rating for an all-terrain. The only time I would give a 9 or a 10, a 9 would be like a tread pattern like this with a softer compound would just be deadly in the rocks. And then a 10 out of 10 is my competition sticky red labels. So I have some BFG crawler red labels, and those are an actual competition tire. That's the only time I would rate something as a 10 because they are made to grip into rocks, and they absolutely do. So those are cheating. Those are at a 10. These are at an 8, and I would say for a tire that is good as these are on the highway to also be this good in the rocks is a very good reason to look into these seriously. One final thought for those of you that are in the all-terrain market right now and you're considering the BFG KO2. When you're shopping for a tire, what I would recommend, especially people in the all-terrain space, is I wouldn't pay attention as much to the performance as I would the long-term durability. So is the tire wearing well? Are the sidewalls starting to crack because you're airing it down and airing it back up? These are the things that I would be paying attention to. In terms of performance, most modern all-terrains are going to perform super similarly. If tire A performs a certain way in the sand, tire B at most would perform like 5% different, but better or worse. We're not going to see drastic differences in the different types of all-terrains in terms of off-road performance. So I would be shopping for a tire based on how people are reporting these tires wear. Is it going out of balance because as it's wearing unevenly? When it goes from 90 to 80%, did it all of a sudden just start getting super loud? Did the sidewall start to crack because you're airing it down every weekend and then airing it back up so you can daily drive it to work all week? These are the things that I would look for if I was shopping for a tire. And in this category, what I can tell you is that the KO2 is wearing perfect. There's no cracks in the sidewalls. I had the alignment, perfect on this Disco before I tore the axles out, of course. And I would expect the tire to wear evenly if it's a good tire. This tire wore evenly, so it is a good tire. That is the best endorsement that I can give these tires. And if you guys like the video, make sure you give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I don't do a lot of reviews, but I do have a bunch more tire reviews on the way throughout the next year. So if you're into that kind of thing, stick around for that. If you want to help support the channel, then go to thedirtlifestyle.com. We have t-shirts, hats, we've got neck gaiters, we have all kinds of gear and stickers, and we also have a link to our Patreon account. If you want to follow me on social media, I'm @DirtLifestyleNate. We'll see you next time.